So today I have Lee Ashley with me, almost Dr. Lee Ashley, and she's one of the AR therapists. And one of the things we've been thinking lately is we need to update and maybe share advancements, what's come along in terms of the treatment of trauma. And in her research, my research, we thought it would be useful for what is betrayal trauma ultimately, and how is it that that impacts us? How do we get beyond it? Because that's probably one of the biggest barriers to healing from infidelity. So to that end, what is betrayal trauma?
Yes, absolutely. Huge barrier. And I do want to say kind of at the outset that I think the word trauma can be overused. It's a word that comes with a lot of meaning and certainly a lot of weight. So we don't want to use it casually. So if we go to the DSM and just consider how trauma is defined, say for PTSD, for example, there's usually a sense of life threat, whether it's you're observing that or you're experiencing that first person. And so with that sense of acute life threat, we can think that certainly can happen in a car accident or a natural disaster, but emotionally speaking, betrayal is a life threat to the relationship, and certainly people can feel that way about their own sense of well-being.
I would add that with the betrayal trauma, it's that attachment wound, right?
Yes.
Attachment rupture is what creates the profound
Exactly.
damage.
Thank you for clarifying that. Yeah, because the spouse, after our parents or caregivers growing up, our spouse is our number one primary connection. Mm-hmm. And so a rupture in that fragmentation there is incredibly devastating. And what makes it even harder to deal with is the secrecy that comes with that.
How would you explain the difference between PTSD and that term CPTSD, and as we talk about betrayal, and which one does betrayal impact? What would you say?
Sure, it's loaded. That's a loaded question.
It's
so I'm going to try to parse that out one step at a time. Let's talk about the acronym PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. So we're talking about a cluster of symptoms: hypervigilance, avoidance, emotional dysregulation, often fear, sometimes flashbacks or nightmares. So that's kind of the typical cluster of symptoms in PTSD.
It's like if I'm walking in the woods and all of a sudden a bear comes out and starts to attack me. Absolutely, that's going to scare me to death, and I'm going to do whatever I can to survive. I don't care if I hurt that bear. I just want the heck out of there. But I can guarantee you the next time I go in the woods, my head's going to be on a swivel, and I'm going to re-experience probably what happened with that trauma.
Absolutely. And if we pause there for just a second, let's talk about what goes on in the body, right? You have this acute response. You get the adrenaline that goes through your body. Your whole body is geared up through rapid breathing. Your heart rate's faster so that you can run or that you can fight that bear. And then once you realize you're safe, you do all the shaking out, right? Releasing of that adrenaline, cortisol, and you feel okay. You might not develop PTSD from that if your system recognizes that, you escaped the bear.
I made it. And I'm a total amazing athlete to have survived, right?
That's right. You beat the bear.
Right, I beat the bear.
Yes.
Now, let's talk about betrayal and how that differs.
This is where it gets really complicated, really difficult, because my heart goes out to anyone enduring betrayal trauma. Part of the problem is you don't know that you missed the bear, that the bear's not present and active or lurking for that matter, right? There's no cue of safety that you got out and it's okay, or at least those cues are hard to find. So sensing safety is difficult. And the person that you're looking to make sure that you're safe is actually the one that injured you in the first place. And so there's a lot of confusion, right? Certainly a lot of vigilance, just the same as the bear. There'd be great hypervigilance or avoidance, right? Which means more relational rupture potentially through those two things right there that come here and go away. And then flashbacks, nightmares, even nightmares of what I think that this means. Part of what gives me so much compassion for people walking through this is that all of that conflict is inside of them, right? It becomes this I don't know if I can trust you or not. Am I overreacting? Am I being crazy. I don't know what to believe. And so the self-doubt becomes quite paralyzing and also overwhelming.
CPTSD, unlike PTSD, which is a single incident, and this is where I think betrayal trauma really comes in, it's ongoing. It's something that happened over time. Oftentimes we talk about it in childhood. It's not just a one-time thing. It happens over and over. And we talk about trickle truth. And to me, I gave the analogy of the bear, but for me, CPTSD, if you take a child, it's a very different response. So a child, if they're being abused by a parent or circumstances, the difference between me as an adult and a child can't lose that relationship with that adult. That is their caregiver. Because it can't be them, what happens is instead of fear, now it's shame. Mm-hmm. And so it goes into shame. It goes to the point of not even knowing how to emotionally regulate it. It just goes into not trusting anything. And that is far more, to me, with betrayal, like what happens to a child. It's like, I don't know that I can live without my mate. Can I survive without my mate? So if I can't be necessarily angry with them or leave them, then I also can potentially blame myself because I don't even know what's happening.
Right. And many people do blame themselves, right? We see a lot of that. I appreciate how you're talking about fear in the relationship, right? There's fear and that being internalized because I can't navigate the relationship with my caregiver. I can't lose that relationship, which again speaks to attachment. So a lot of complex PTSD does have an underlying component of what's the attachment been like before, because obviously with betrayal, it's going to bring up not only what's going on in the relationship with the spouses, but it will certainly bring up anything before then. Any template, I'd like to call it, that was there prior to that rupture, that relationship rupture.
And I think, too, that sometimes, especially because of the Kaiser-Permanente study years ago, where we came up with the ACE test, that whole cumulative aspect, what we learned is that trauma is cumulative. And in a sense, for a child, when that happens over and over, it creates that inability to emotionally regulate. Same thing happens with betrayal trauma. It's like, how do I even manage myself? Because my system is going crazy.
By 12 months of age, 12 months, right? Because we're doing this mirroring, looking to our caregivers to get a sense of self, to get a sense of feeling okay, that our needs are going to be met, that we're accepted. And even by 12 months of age, the attachment styles at 12 months mimic toddlerhood, mimic adulthood most of the time. So barring any kind of significant event or relational repair. So it's pretty profound.
And you even mentioned that not everybody has betrayal trauma. One of the things I've noticed, though, if somebody had a lot of developmental trauma, has that high adverse childhood event scale that Kaiser-Permanente did, it's almost like they marry someone, I think, who they believe is going to provide that safety and security that they never had growing up. And then when that person who represents something that they've never had betrays, it's like the very foundation under their life is just shattered. And I think in that sense, they're even more likely to develop.
Definitely more likely, because the historical experience on which we base our expectations for the future, right, has now been consistent. There's been betrayal, whether in family of origin or needs not met, we could say.
Right.
Needs not met, insecure attachment, which could include avoidance, right? And then now my partner is just one more person like that. We tend to marry our emotional equivalent, which is something to consider. It doesn't look that way in the courtship days. We think that person's going to be able to fill all those needs that have gone unmet, but the familiarity that we have with that person is kind of where that attachment work shows up.
The way I look at it is when they find somebody who's trying to hide their shame or their addiction, and they've got all of that image out there so that nobody can see, so they can protect themselves. That's really appealing to somebody who comes also from the same background without a lot of stability.
Right.
I know that's exactly what happened to Stephanie. Stephanie would have sworn that she would have an affair before me. And yet she had no idea what was behind the image that I was portraying, because my shame was so great. I had to keep ahead of my shame by performance.
Which really kind of begs the question then, what is secure attachment and how do we get there? Because what you're describing is if we're putting on airs for our mate, even for ourselves, perhaps even to function in the world, maybe we're not really known, which takes us back to kind of those earliest days, right? Where do we have that, whether it's then or now, because we can certainly want to invest in relationships that offer that repair, but can we engage honestly, openly, kind of, I like to say, without my fig leaves on, right? And be known and accepted, right? And regarded and not left, right? Not abandoned.
And I think that oftentimes, whenever that betrayal occurs, with infidelity, when those secrets come out, it really creates a crisis. It creates, in some ways, a reset.
It's an opportunity for reset.
An opportunity for reset.
Yes.
And I know for me, finally having been exposed, being willing to be real, from my side, the betrayer, it was amazing to know that I could still be loved.
Yes.
I always say you can never be loved unconditionally as long as you only conditionally let someone know you. So it was very transformative for me. However, for Stephanie, she's dealing with the unknown, with, like you said, that safety. So what are the physiological impacts to the person who's been betrayed?
I think of an earthquake or a volcano going off internally, right? It's all of a sudden you don't know what safe is, right? It's like looking for the walls around you and not being able to find them. Sometimes feeling like you're suspended in space or in water and don't have an anchor. There are certainly physiological things to the body, right? It can be certainly a trembling. It can be weakness. Sometimes with a lot of energy, anger, empowerment there, but there you might feel a great rush of energy and physical capability or desire to push, to run, to fight. Cognitively, you can feel very spacey. You can forget things. This is the classic time when people don't know where they put their keys, don't know where the mail is, and that even just makes us more frustrated because our lives feel less and less in our own control. So all kinds of things like that. And then the emotional regulation, with body, with heartbroken, mind unclear, body either in tremoring or shut down, just collapse. We can feel quite powerless, which is also infuriating, right? So we've got this powerless collapse, and then we have this anger about it because we're not in control of our lives anymore. And the person that we would naturally want to go to, we can't go to anymore. We're looking for answers from that person,
right?
Understanding. And there is no good answer. That's the other thing. There's not a good answer for why.
It's a lot to do with how they grew up. I always say, all marriage problems happen between ages 0 and 18, and it's that baggage we bring in that we don't address.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
That
we don't even know.
We don't even know we have the baggage. That's true. We're blind to it.
That's why this is such a great opportunity, because this is not only an opportunity, recovery, I think, from infidelity. One of the things I love about this work is that this is not just an opportunity to correct the marriage. There's so many things that each person in the couple gains internally that they get to take with them to every relationship thereafter, if they'll do the work. So it takes two to make a marriage. It only takes one to sever it.
Or I would say it takes only one to change a marriage, two to keep it the same. They have to keep doing the same dance. Both are true.
Both are true.
One of the things, to me, that CPTSD and PTSD have in common is the intrusiveness, the re-experiencing.
Absolutely.
Can you tell people what's happening with that aspect? What's going on?
Well, I'll let you go through the brain science of it, but basically, it's a form of flashback, right?
Mm-hmm. Oh, absolutely.
And the other thing is that in that because of that relationship rupture, we're looking to make repair. We're trying to understand what happened so that we can avoid that, not do that again, right? That's that survival instinct in the mind. But if we can't understand, if we don't know, this is the same person that told me they were going to be at work late, is now telling me, hey, I'm safe for you. Well, I don't know what to believe.
Yeah.
And so there's all kinds of, as you said, intrusive thoughts, projections.
Avoidance, negative alteration of perception.
Negative alteration.
Everything's hopeless. It'll never change.
Yes.
That's where we all start, right?
Absolutely.
After that. One of the things I'm really passionate about is, as I've been learning, what's happening in the brain. So I do.
I know, we geek out on that.
With trauma, that information, when you're overwhelmed, doesn't get processed in the same way that regular memories get processed. A normal memory is stored in the hippocampus. And as we go through life, that memory becomes distant. I mean, I can think about graduation in high school, and it's way back there, I remember it, or my parents' death. You know, it's got some emotions, but it's like, it's in the past.
Yeah.
However, trauma memories are a different cognitive entity. They're not stored in the hippocampus. They're actually stored in the posterior cingulate cortex. I don't mean to geek out, but it's a different part of the brain over here. The problem with memories that end up being stored in the PCC is that when they get activated, you re-experience it. It's like, I just worked with someone, they're 6 years out, and every time they would see their husband, they would get triggered, and they immediately went back to 2019. And they're re-experiencing what happened in 2019 when they're really living in 2025. Because your mind automatically, when that happens, your body is going into that same fight or flight.
Mm-hmm. Or freeze.
Or freeze, whenever it gets triggered. And so you're not going to be able to move on. And this is the worst thing about it to me, is that you're stuck back there and here. And with single trigger, you jump time zones, you go back. Now you're living here, but you may know that you're here, but it feels here.
And your partner thinks that you're here because you've been here until that cue.
They're living in 2025 most likely, and you're still in 2019. They're going, are you ever going to be able to get over it?
And then sometimes the story that they tell themselves is that you're doing this on purpose, or you're doing this for control.
You're trying to punish me.
Yes.
You're trying to punish me. You're trying to punish me. Can't you ever forgive me for this?
Yeah.
And it has nothing to do with forgiving.
Nothing to do with it.
Has everything to do with the fact that that memory is still there and it hasn't been addressed and hasn't been converted. So,
hasn't been converted, yeah.
Right.
Because I dare say it's probably been addressed, probably in so many ways.
Talk therapy?
Yep.
Zero efficacy. It doesn't seem to convert those memories from the PCC to the hippocampus. And in my opinion, I think a lot of times as we as therapists treat this, we're really not looking at the right goal. I mean, I'm kind of getting to the point to where it's a matter of converting a memory, not a matter of trying to change a memory.
Which goes back to the body and how we can do that conversion, right? As you pointed out, talk therapy is not helpful here. We've got to get back into that limbic system, right? The emotional center of the brain, the sensory center, brainstem, et cetera, where we are really addressing the physical feelings, the physical sensations, and the emotion that goes with that, and meeting our clients right there. As we do, then they can make those conversions. Then that meaning can be scaffolded. One of the common triggers with clients is that they'll be watching a movie and all of a sudden something will show up. One of the things that couples can do is to begin naming what they see in real time. Because just naming it, right, gives you some sense of control in labeling it, but then offering the meaning making of that scene, right, and going ahead and processing it that way together, right, gives you a sense of resolution instead of just this bomb that happened and you have no control. You're not able to respond to the bomb except to, walk away in shame or anger. If they walk through that scene together, right, naming it, labeling it, making meaning of it together according to their goals, right, and their care for one another, it can be a corrective experience so that initial rupture can lead to a positive unified outcome instead of, instead of a one more in the old history of shame, blame, despair.
And of course, all of what you just said is also an attachment exercise, where now it's us doing something, not them, me, whatever.
Exactly. Yeah, so powerful. Going back to ways to heal, art therapy, sensory motor art therapy is really powerful. I still love internal family systems for this, because one of the powers of internal family systems is the awareness of the body. Feel free to speak up if I'm not remembering some of them, but I love sensory motor art therapy for that reason. It doesn't even have to involve art, but anywhere where you can do what you wish you had done in the moment.
Yes, absolutely.
Because of the integration that the brain does with imagination, we can act out. That's why psychodrama is so powerful. We can act out what we wish we had done. And again, sometimes just for the audience, maybe we need to make sure we do that in the presence of a qualified helper. But those kinds of things can be very healing because the brain will integrate them as if they really happened.
All of these trapped memories, they are in long-term memory. When you get reactivated, suddenly that memory is not in long-term, it's been reconsolidated, or it's consolidated up here. Now, there is a possibility, and this is what you're talking about, in that 5-hour window, to alter that memory before it goes back into long-term
filing,
right? So it's like, the ink is wet when you get activated as you're watching that particular show. Now there's a chance for things to change. And then when that memory reconsolidates, the cool thing about our brain is it doesn't keep a backup. Literally, that is the new memory. And that is the way that I end up treating it. Of course, as you know, I'll sit there and just create a mismatch in the brain, ultimately where it looks different. Same thing with what you're talking about. Once that's there, then it's malleable and I can change the memory and it becomes a distant memory, not a memory that is timeless.
I like the analogy of it reading like a chapter in a book, right? It reads like a chapter in a book. You're not in it in the moment. You can pick it up, you can put it down.
Right, exactly. It's just a regular memory. It's sad. Once upon a time, we didn't understand. I mean, when I was growing up, I don't know how they trained you, but in my undergrad stuff, it was like, whenever a memory was made, it was like a book, ink was wet, and within 5 hours, the ink dried, and that book was put on a shelf, and you could always find it somewhere. But we've learned, even with the memories from betrayal trauma that are so disorienting, so painful, they can change. And that's how we heal. But I believe with betrayal trauma, you have to take responsibility to do something about it, because time will not heal it. You and I both treated people dealing with this 15 years out, 20 years out. And then when we help them shift, they go, oh my gosh, I didn't know that could even happen.
And the thing that I want to also clarify is that the content of the memory isn't gone. Because I don't want people to feel like we're brainwashing or anything like that. It's not like that disappears and you have no memory of it anymore. It just loses the charge. And sometimes there's also insight or kind of reclassification that happens, if you will, so that it doesn't sting the same way and it doesn't feel like it's got you've got it, right? You've got it in your files instead of it taking over.
Exactly. So it's not coming up and you're not jumping time zones back to D-Day. And to me, the reason it's also important, it is very hard to make a decision on a relationship when you're still re-experiencing this person as the abuser. Even if they've changed, how do you really deal with what the present is?
Right, and to that point, when you're in trauma, right, and typically that's at 6 months or more, then you're not even filtering what they're doing the same way. You cannot see. The brain has a bias toward cues of threat or danger instead of cues of safety. So it takes a lot of extra work to even notice cues of safety. What I mean by that is they're punctual, they're doing what they say they're going to do, they pick up the phone when you call, they're where they said they were going to be. All those are cues of safety. The attunement, right, the eye contact, the physical proximity, those kinds of things can be addressed and are nuanced for the well-being of both. And so empathy is offered. Those are all cues of safety.
Right, and even more than that, you can sense, to me, especially if they're trying to keep you safe, not just cues of safety, but movement towards you. Because ultimately, as I look at attachment, it's, do I matter to you? Do you care about me? Are you choosing me? Are you going to protect me? And when, you see them trying to protect you, you suddenly go, oh, that means something.
And it does take time, obviously. One of the things that when we experience safety physiologically, it's that patterned, predictable responsiveness, right? So it's not just I do this and I grind it out for a month, or I grind it out for 6 weeks, or whatever it is, or as long as my Hope for Healing class is going on, right? It's consistent, and it doesn't have to be perfect. That's the other thing that's thank you that our brains do have some measure of plasticity there as well, some flexibility. That in fact, some research I saw recently said that even with mothers and their infants, moms get it wrong about every 19 seconds. But because of that repair, they're getting it right more often than they're getting it wrong when they're attuned.
Really?
Yes.
That's a cool thing.
Isn't that neat? So the same is true. I mean, I'm sorry, our bodies grow up, but our hearts don't. Our need for attachment doesn't grow up.
Part of what I'm seeing too, I had this thought. So if you look at the advice they give to therapists, which really is more about core needs, but I think it also applies to disclosure, because that core need is what the information basically they feel is relevant is coming through that filter of that core need. And those are the core needs are so radically different that when you're asking questions and they're giving information, I think there's a radical difference in expectations.
You're talking facts, I'm talking feeling, and that's part of what the disclosure process that I learned from APSATS does, is that it separates those from the outset and explicitly. In addition to that, how do we get to that information, right? Well, you've got to start at the story, and this is where I appreciate the definition of infidelity as the keeping of secrets. We both have to understand what's been going on, right? What our history is, and from there we can make meaning of that. But the attachment cannot happen without truth.
Well, true that.
Yes.
But I think there's a way that if, in my mind, I'm thinking if I could get, the involved spouse to present information in a way that is, I was going to say connecting, but is literally
it's making a bid,
open, right? And I don't know that in disclosures I've seen that hasn't always been the goal.
Agreed. I think you're talking about a way to communicate in general, because one of the ways I work with my clients is I call it my inner announcer. You're going to announce what you're doing and why, right? You're your own narrator of the story that you're living in the present moment. So I might say, I'm going to practice right now, and what I want to do is let you know what I've been thinking about the episode of last Friday night. And I understand that it might hurt you, it might scare you, and I'll go as slowly as you want me to, and I'll move wherever you want me to in this room so that you feel safe and you can even be in control. But I want to offer an explanation about that because I love you, because I care, because I'm willing to do whatever work it takes to repair this rupture. And I may get jacked up and I may get nervous, my voice may quiver, I may need to pause, but just know I'm not going anywhere. I'm going to stay here until I get it all out, because that's what you deserve. A baseline premise that maybe we need to make explicit is human beings were created for connection.
Right.
So we have to have connection in order to feel a sense of safety, and yet, right, when that connection is threatening, we will separate, right? And so unfortunately, we will separate for safety, but we can't live there. Human beings don't function well outside of connection. So we have this internal, or even between us, kind of dynamic going on where I need connection for safety, but then I have to have distance for safety. So there's this tension.
What I believe in my soulness, my oneness with Stephanie, or, that is a very unique attachment. In fact, it has all kinds of chemicals involved in it, but it is a fit. There's a soulness there. So the person best capable, I believe, of healing the attachment, because it takes attachment to heal attachment, will be the person that fits that hole the best. However, this is where safety and responsibility and accountability and lots of other things come in. But I think making the argument that if you can sit there and this person can come back, I think it expedites the ultimate healing. And that's why you end up with a marriage that was better than before.
Yes, which brings up those core components of healing, right? The humility. Right. I have to be willing to sit in this with you, right? It's worth sitting whatever it takes, right? The responsibility piece. So I think honesty, humility, and responsibility, or some say accountability, are those core components if you're the wayward spouse. That begs the requirement to put defensiveness to the side. There can't be defensiveness there.
Oh, no.
So that core cause of your mate's well-being.
Well, it's back to you've got to be able to reflect to connect. And, if you correct, you disconnect. In your mind, what does the wayward spouse need to understand about this attachment rupture, betrayal trauma? What do they need to have in their mind?
I think they need a protective shield. I think they need to live in plexiglass for a moment, because the way that their spouse is responding is typically a trauma response. It's if it's high energy, rage, activation, it's usually that primal panic, right? That protest for what has happened. And that is an effort for connection, even though it feels very threatening. And I say that plexiglass just as an imaginary screen, right, where they can be somewhat distant. They're not threatened necessarily. They could be. If they can get into an observer mode and notice the what's happening, right, from a third party as if you were watching it, as opposed to being in it. But if you can kind of step back and observe your spouse, you'll notice just how dysregulated, how injured they are. And then you want to tend to the injury.
I love the way how beautifully you said that. Here's the problem. If I'm feeling lower than a snake's belly, I need a stepladder to get to a snake's belly, and I'm having this much shame. So when someone is emotionally dysregulated and they're really angry with me, it's awfully hard to have that plexiglass shield.
That's true, but that's part of your own work. You've got to get into your body first, right? So I'm recognizing that I'm lower than a snake's belly. And if I keep going there, right, and I move into collapse, right, that's going to do no one any good, including myself, right? I'm just caving in to that. And I understand the energy, because it's an energy drain, right? It is absolutely overwhelming. But so I'd offer just some techniques on mindfulness. One of the ways that we heal, as you mentioned earlier, is through attachment. So we want to call our buddies. We want to call those folks that are in our corner, that know the best about us, that believe the best about us, honestly, right? So that we can enter in and engage. But so again, I go back to that inner announcer. I'm feeling like I'm lower than a snake's belly, and this is not about me. I want to be present for you. How can I help, right? How can I be there? Because I am committed to doing it differently. I want to do it differently this time, so I'm not going to go away, even if I'm here on the floor in a heap. I'll be in it with you, right?
Another thing I think can be helpful for the wayward spouse is educating themselves about trauma, so they don't take it personally. They understand this is normal. They can see that which part of their mate is speaking. Is it the dysregulated part? Is that symptom of the whole CPTSD? Or, are they there? And we're talking to each other and getting those cues. I remember a couple I had, it was so funny. She called her husband in because every time she got dysregulated, she would tell him to pack his crap and get out. And she said, well, let's bring him in. I want to talk to him. So they come in. So she's not dysregulated. I'm there. And she goes, honey, I want you to know that every time I tell you to pack your crap and get out, that's just a sign. That's what happens when I get flooded and I'm dysregulated, and I'm really kind of easy because I just do the same thing every time. So you always know when I've gone off rails. And he said, honey, that's great, but what am I supposed to do? Because if I don't leave, you always call the police. He said, I know, I'm working with Rick on that. I'm getting to the
Jeepers. Ouch. Yeah.
So, but being able to recognize it and learn to even laugh about it and how to handle it. I mean, if you can see that it's really the trauma, it's not you, because otherwise the wayward spouse is going to feel like they must hate me. They'll never trust me.
That's why I go to plexiglass or any kind of mindfulness and getting into your own body, because if you can downregulate, right? If you can get into your own body, right, then you have a better chance of using those cognitive skills to employ the trauma education, right? And recognize, okay, my spouse is in a fight flight state right now.
The wayward spouse needs to understand you can outregulate your mate. You really can. However, there is a point where you probably can't do it anymore. And that's what I'm always trying to teach the wayward spouse. Say, look, I am not safe for us right now. I'm not safe for you right now. So I need to take a break so that I can be here for you. I think teaching the wayward spouse how to also keep safety in place for them.
So why that works is that that person is saying what's going on inside of them. They're giving context. This is what's happening right now. You're dysregulated. I'm not regulated enough to be present to you. I want to be present to you. But since I'm feeling like I'm about to, the lights are about to trip, fantastic, I'm going to step out, right? And so that gives the partner context, and context is one of those cues of safety. We have to understand what's going on in the moment. That's part of those walls that give us that sense of scaffolding. We have something to hang on to. So if we're just having this escalating energy, or one of us, or opposite energy, we know it's not working, but we don't have anything else that we can rely on or hang on to. So context is one of those ways that we can offer that. Even you can use parts of your house. You can use certain places. Here's my big thing about recovery. I am willing to look like a fool in front of my mate to get well. And part of this is going back to image management, right? And the way I want to perceive myself in the world. I think if you're willing to look foolish, right, you can heal. But you can't protect your image and heal at the same time.
Part of what you just said is it's you being willing to look foolish. The hard thing is, well, if they would just not do that, we'll sit there and start saying how our mate needs to be different. And to me, healing from that sort of trauma is your responsibility, not your mate's. And it is so frustrating to me with betrayal trauma when it's like, well, you did this, so you need to fix it. It's almost like I'm not going to get help. And they don't change. I mean, it's like they can't heal because time and their mate can be perfect to some extent. But unless they take responsibility for their own safety, if they put it in the hands of somebody else who's already proven that they're incapable of getting it right 100% of the time, even if they get it 95% of the time, one time when they don't do it right, if you're putting your safety there, you're gone.
And this is where some former ways of treating trauma have evolved too, because we used to think there used to be a little too much on codependency, right? And then the pendulum kind of swung the other way. And so again, it all in my mind goes, and who knows, in 20 years it won't be attachment. But I do think that's a significant factor, right? If you're responsible for my health and well-being, right, and I'm not responsible for that, then I'm powerless. I'm already giving my power, giving my agency to someone else. And that's not what this dance is.
No.
This dance is two whole people becoming a unit together.
And it's also two people becoming whole and doing a new dance.
Yes.
Because to us, it's always using this as a catalyst for transformation. Now, one of the other pieces of betrayal trauma to me too, and you've seen this like over the weekend, when you have to heal that attachment wound, you need attachment, but you also need other safe attachments to me, like-minded people are the best. And I love Saturday afternoon at EMS weekend when all the people with betrayal trauma are meeting and working together.
So good.
And watching when they feel that safety and that connection. It's like, you know this, they're literally taking selfies of each other. It's like, there is such a profound, you go, that's what's missing. One of the things we didn't talk about is isolation. What have you noticed about isolation and betrayal trauma?
Oh, unfortunately, those are the folks that heal the least or that don't heal at all. Whether they isolate in their pain, their shame. Unfortunately, they can physically isolate, or they can disown that part of themselves, disown that. And there are a number of marriages that go on limping, right? With the silence.
They're flatlined.
They're flatlined, great way to say it. That's a very good description. They're flatlined, and there's not joy, there's not connection.
There's not life.
There's not life, right, flatlined. There are some even attachment styles that are more weighted to that preference, to going that direction, those avoidant attachment styles. If you can participate in something like EMS, where you can even observe other people, even if you're not quite ready to make those changes directly, the observation of that is a practice, right, that gets you comfortable to take the next step, maybe even for yourself. But again, we want people to live and thrive. We don't want people hanging out with us the rest of their lives. One of the things, unfortunately, whether it's trauma or anything else, our relational experiences tend to generalize. And if we're in isolation and that's our protective space, we're disconnected. And if that generalizes in the workplace, in family life.
Yeah, and that's not good for you physiologically.
Oh, yes. You want to talk about disease and death rates and morbidity?
28% more likely to have a heart attack, 32% more likely to die of a stroke. Yeah. Absolutely. Those things, that isolation is the worst part.
Mm-hmm. It reminds me, I had some clients that were in the Vegas shooting. They described running away from the shooter, and this is one of those things that really is telling about primal human need. As they were running behind some of the bleachers, one person reported to me that the people there were on top of each other, practically rolling on top of each other, could not get close enough to each other as they had bullets whizzing over their heads. And so you think about how, these people were not friends before this. They were in a traumatic moment together. And that was what was most important, was being together. Human beings need that. It's essential for us.
We've also learned, in the approach that we take at Very Recovery, is community. Only because historically, the way trauma has been dealt with is through music, it's through community, shared beliefs. Those are all huge pillars. And one of the things I think people don't understand in terms of healing that trauma is when you're in a group, when you're in that community, literally, your body doesn't have to work on regulating. The community it's called load sharing.
Neuroception, yes.
Neuroception, totally. It's like my body gets to rest.
Because you can sense safety in those other people. Those other people have a similar context. They get you, they understand you, you're practicing connection, so those cues of safety are really strong. Right.
That's the critical element, is having other people like you, where you don't even feel the shame. Because it's like, I'm normal here. This is my tribe. Yes. Looks a little jacked up, but it's still my tribe.
Yes, that's right. That's right. We all need a tribe.
One last question for you. And we can throw this one back and forth. But if someone is dealing with those symptoms of that emotional dysregulation, the lack of attachment, they can't come back. It's like they want to heal. What treatments are effective for dealing with those intrusive thoughts and attachment wounds?
Yeah. I'm going to offer some treatments that basically are going from the brainstem up instead of prefrontal cortex down.
Okay.
Because so much of trauma is embodied.
Right.
We experience it in our body and emotions, and then we try to make sense of it cognitively. I've got a bias toward equine inclusive.
I know, you're the horse
Got your
lady.
boots on today.
Yeah, I know.
So I appreciate
Ready to go
that.
riding.
Yes. I like ETT is amazing just because, and that's more of just a brain-centered.
Yeah, that is like
it's its own.
Some subcortical.
Yes.
I mean, I can treat people and they don't even have to talk.
Yeah. I've had amazing breakthroughs with sensory motor art therapy. You and I both know music, dance, so psychodrama is another powerful one because, again, it engages the whole body. Even empty chair work, internal family systems is kind of a version, includes some of that. But where you are attending to an aspect of your being as a whole unit with physical sensations, emotions, as well as thoughts and motivations. So we want to incorporate as much of the body as we can in the therapeutic activity.
Another thing that people don't consider, and I think is what our research is showing in our efficacy studies, is being in those groups that we do have a profound impact on PTSD over time. The PTSD slope scores, they continue to drop. It's literally that community as historically we have healed. It's being with other people like you in a structured way that facilitates healing. Mm-hmm. And that's as effective as probably many of the other things. Now, I think obviously when we can do the subcortical work, the way I can change things in 3 hours, that's great. But it's also a long-term healing that happens when you're in safe community and you're growing together.
Because part of that community helps you rewrite that history. It gives you those corrective experiences so that you have new history to draw from.
Well, I want to thank you for coming here. This has been so much fun. I could ramble about this stuff. We didn't even get geeky.
We tried not to, but
I know.
yeah.
Well,
but that's great. I enjoyed it. I could talk for hours, but thank you for having me.
And what I hope happens is that people have comments, and if you have questions, we'd like to come back and do this again. It gives us another chance just to talk about something we're passionate about.
Yes.
So leave comments.
We keep learning. We're happy to share what we learn with you.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so fun.
So,
healing.
Thank you, Lee.
Thank you, Rick.
Bye.